Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Anya. I am the former president of the Haiku Community Association, and it is my distinct pleasure to open this meeting tonight. This is the May 10th?
Oh, come on.
8th?
7th.
7th? Oh my gosh. It's those moments I gave you. They're catching up on me. This is the May 7th meeting of the Haiku Community Association. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you your new president of the Community Association, Ms. Jennifer Livingston.
Now it's on. Well, it's my honor and my distinct pleasure to serve you and the entire Haiku community as the president of the Haiku Community Association. And Netra, if you will, please. Before you get too comfortable there, Mr. Mike.
Let's have a round of applause for Mike and his many years of service.
Mike and the board of the HCA has created an organization that the Haiku community can use to get a lot of things done. And we can decide what those things should be and how to get them done. But because they created a strong 501c3 and have been advocating on behalf of the community for so long, we have a really strong organization that we can need to take forward, or use to take forward. And so, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to also thank Tim Wolf for that 501c3. He had very much to do with it as well.
And he's the man in the back. And then if we could just have the other board members of the HCA stand up so you could be recognized.
Bring them forward. Bring them up front.
Come on up.
Netra Halprin, Charlotte King,
Dan Grantham.
David Fry,
And Lucienne today.
and Lucienne today.
Thank you. We have a refreshed web page that can be found at haikumaui.org, and we're going to be doing our very best to keep that updated with information that you will hopefully find useful and also act on. And that action is why we're here tonight. I recently had the pleasure of going to an alliance of community association meetings, and I met Dick Mayer there. And I was so inspired by what he had to say and who he is. He's a past professor at the university, and I think he's probably one of the people on this island that have advocated the most and stayed as in touch, like super in touch with all the topics and kept things very current and pushing forward. I have a friend who calls him, and also Lucienne, the big dogs of the GPAC, and I think that explains it really well. And so it's my pleasure to have him and Lucienne here tonight to bring you guys up to date on what's going on with the Maui Island Plan. The first 9 chapters have been passed, but the 10th chapter has not been passed. And I think it's called the implementation chapter, and we need to pay really close attention to how that chapter ends up getting worded so that we actually have a Maui Island Plan that can be implemented. And I'm not the expert on the topic, so I will not say too much more and let our presenters take over. One other couple things that I wanted to say is that on the bottom of the back of this little handout, we're also going to talk about the Paia bypass and reserving the land between Paia and Baldwin Beach. Mike Gagne will speak on those topics. The last topic on the bottom is how you can help save the Kalakapua playground. And I can speak on that because we've been working on the playground pretty hard for the past amount of time, and we're getting closer and closer to actually getting funding. The issue with that is that once even we get the green light and get our funding, it takes 6 to 8 weeks before that actually kicks in and we can actually access those funds. So at some point we will be asking the community to help us fill in the gap between the amount of money that was allocated by the county and also the amount of time between when we get that money from the county and when we need to start spending that money. So The other thing I wanted to say about that is we're having another work day on the 17th and 18th, and the work days are a lot of fun. I encourage you all to come out and bring the kids. It's a great way to connect with the people around you and do some good work, like you go home because you've worked. It feels good. You don't need to go to the gym that day. So that's the 17th and 18th from 9 to 2. That information is also on our website, and there's a Facebook page for that. That's Save Kalakapua Playground. And you can also visit Haiku Community Association on Facebook as well. So, without any further ado, Dick, if you'd like to step up and Lucian. Where's Lucian? There she is. So, do you guys want to sit up here? You're going to sit there. So you need the mic.
Give him the mic.
Okay, let me just say a few words first. Just as background, the Maui Island Plan has been underway now for about a decade in various forms. First getting the original studies done, what we might want to do. This is the first time Maui has had an island plan. Up in the past, we've had only community plans, so I'm going to refer to some of those things. And I'll go through the process. Just as own background, as Jen mentioned, I taught at the college for 34 years, have been very much involved with planning issues. I was on the Upcountry Citizen Advisory Group several times back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. I was vice chair, and then I was also, and right now I'm the vice chair of the General Plan Advisory Committee, which is appointed by the mayor and the county council to help give advice to the county about what the residents of Maui wanted. And so what you're seeing here will be an interaction between what the general public has been recommending and advocating for, and what some of the people in the planning department of the county and the administration have been pushing, and they're not necessarily the same. And so what we're trying to do is let you know what some of the questions are that are outstanding. Let me go through most of this presentation, and then we'll have Lucian give her presentation, and then the two of us will be up here in front answering questions.
After you're done.
Yep. Okay. And what we'll also do at the very end, we have a couple of maps that show where the proposed developments are taking place. One near Baldwin Park, one across the street here, and also the Paia bypass. There are topics that I know really interest the people in Haiku, so we'll talk about that after we get through this presentation.
Hi, I'm Lucienne. I just want to explain what Dick's going to present is an overview of a whole process. That process has actually been completed. There's not a lot we can change about anything except the very last chapter of our Maui Island Plan. And I just want to say, why does this mean anything to us? And that is, it's the chapter about how we realize our dreams. So we have this whole plan full of dreams, you know, things we'd like to see happen, things we'd like to see not happen. But if then you end up with an implementation chapter that's very vague, that doesn't give a proper avenue for the public to be heard, then those dreams just stay on a piece of paper and they stay on a shelf, and there is no impetus to ever realize it, because no one can ever point a finger and say, but it says here in the implementation chapter that you are going to accomplish these things. We want to support you in doing that. Instead, you say, well, it says there that they may, or they could consider, or they, you know, these are not where we need to head. It's the time for action, and so this is a call to action. This is about putting the shalls back in the plan instead of the maybes. This is about being specific about where we could look for funding for things rather than just saying, oh, well, we'll figure it out later. So these are some of the issues that are up here today, and that's why it's important to you, your businesses, your families. Thanks. And now to Dick.
I basically have my back to you, but I think it'll work a little bit better this way. Okay. What this is leading up to is next Wednesday, a week from today. Yeah, we can get that light. Yeah, great. Next Wednesday, the County Council will be holding a public hearing to get public input, the last chance for the public really to speak out on what they like or dislike in this last chapter, and to make any changes. Now, This is all on a website, and the links are there right now, but what I'm going to urge your officers to do, Jen and others, to send this out to you so you would be able to link up to that direct page and get some of the immediate material that I'm presenting tonight. And you may want to go to the council meeting next Wednesday at 6 p.m. up at the council chambers, or you may want to send email testimony in, or you could call any of the council members personally and say, this I like, this I dislike, please do what you're doing, oh, please don't do what you're doing. Okay. I'm going to go through the process. This is the way it used to be. It used to be that we had one general plan for the whole county, and it was really very, very general. And then on Maui Island, there were 6 community plan districts, as you can see here on the map. And you're in the one in what's called North Maui, or Haiku. And it has its own community plan that was adopted in the mid-90s. It's now almost just about 20 years old. And it was put together by citizens and the community, and it's still in effect until it's changed. It won't be changed and updated until after this Maui Island Plan is adopted, and then they're going to begin going through the community plans one by one, actually starting with Lanai and Molokai, then West Maui, South Maui, Central Maui, Upcountry, and you probably won't be starting until about 2018-19. So it's going to be like 25 years before you get a chance to do a massive change. If you wanted to make a particular change now, and you can get a council member to introduce it, you can change the community plan. It's not cast in cement, but the council member, Mike White, or any one of the council members could introduce an item, and you can say, we don't like this in our present community plan, we'd like to update it. In 2003, they changed the ordinance, and we have a new process. The new process was, or is, that we first have a county-wide policy plan, which gives a lot of very, very good policies. It was put together by the GPAC and then approved by the council. It's in effect already. It's on the county website. GPAC stands for General Plan Advisory Committee. It's the 25-member group, 4 members appointed by the mayor, and the other 21 appointed by the county council to represent each of the districts on the island. It's geographically very well spread out. It also has members who are what might be considered pro-development, and those who are, let's say, pro-environmental, and some general people who are sort of in the middle and good went back and forth. So it's really a pretty good group of people to bring forth the ideas from the community. After the island plan, and by the way, the reason for the island plan was that when we only had district plans, there was nothing said about what happens between districts. So if you have a water line that goes from one district into another one, for example, from Paia Haiku district, you have water lines that run into upcountry, and you have water lines that run into central Maui. Well, what planning will be done for those 2 districts? If one says we're not going to give you water, and the other says we're going to take all your water, who resolves it? So Maui Island, that was an effort to take a look at highways, water lines, sewage lines, and other services which cross boundaries, as well as a number of other island-wide issues. Once that plan is adopted, and hopefully it will be adopted this year, and it's expected that the final chapter will be adopted at the end of this month, then they'll go on to the district plans, and each district will have a chance to update their present community plan. The idea is on these things. This is in the law itself, where it says Maui County Code, Chapter 2.80b. It says it's designed to provide plans that clearly identify provisions that are meant to be policy guidelines and provisions that are intended to have the force and effect of law. What that means is that some of the statements that are made in here are guidelines. It may say encourage the protection of the beaches, or discourage something else. Well, that is not a law in the sense it can't be enforced as a law, because all it says is encourage or discourage. It doesn't say how it's done or whatever. But where you want to have something where it's intended to have the force and effect of law, then the wording will be different. It will say prohibit this, or require this, or when you use the word shall, like the county shall get rid of traffic jams. They got to find a way to do it, because it says they have to do it. So it's something that uses the word shall, that has the effect of law, and that's something we would rather see, as opposed to the word may. If the county may do something, if the administration wants to do it, or the planning director or public works wants to do it, they may or may not do it. They have that choice. So what we'd like to see oftentimes is a change from may to shall if we really want something done. Oh, sorry, let me go back. The other two, in the middle there, to implement and enforce plans through prioritization and accountability. One of the things the plan was intended to do is say which things are really important and who is responsible, who's accountable if they're not done, or who's responsible for doing things. And finally, to increase public and community participation in the planning process. The idea is that the public should be involved in the process. And as you'll hear from our discussion tonight, one of the concerns we have is that the public did speak out, did participate, gave lots of testimony, and now the administration and the county council is not necessarily listening to it. The process went like this, the Maui Island Plan. Now we're only talking about the Maui Island Plan. The General Plan Advisory Committee was given a draft. It was a very weak draft. It's the first time it was ever done, and we got a copy of it, and then the GPAC spent about 9-10 months going out and having hearings in every district in the island, several times in fact, listened to loads of public testimony, heard from community associations, residents, and we finally drafted what we thought was a good Maui Island Plan. That went then to the Planning Commission with the people who usually sit and review projects, so they have that expertise. They reviewed it, and they made their recommendations. And that went then to the planning director, who's a county official, appointed by the mayor. Will Spence is his name. And he took a look at it, and he made his recommendations. The law states that all three of those recommendations, the GPAC, the Planning Commission, and the planning director, are all sent to the county council, and they are to look at those and make a decision on what the law will finally read. All three versions went to the council's planning committee, but only the planning director's version was used. And that's the first major concern that we have with this implementation chapter. The council never bothered to look at or review in any open forum either the GPAC or the planning commission, but rather the version put together by one person, the planning
Who
director.
had never heard from the public for years and years like these other bodies had.
He had not been on in the county government at that time. He was a consultant for developers. Finally, the council's planning committee reviewed it, and finally, in February of this year, end of February, early March, they completed their work and sent it over to the full council, and that's where it stands right now. The county council has received it. They've called for a public hearing next week on Wednesday, where they will take input on the planning director's version, essentially, which they tinkered with a little bit, but didn't majorly modify. What the planning director did do was he changed many of the word places where we said shall to may. He deleted certain things which we thought the public wanted to see in the plan, and he made a number of substantive changes. This is the background to the plan, how it went through. I'll do this very briefly. Back around 2003, you can see it's 11 years ago, there were some studies done by the county on housing issues, infrastructure, environment, scenic routes along highways, water, a whole host of important issues on the island. 23 different studies altogether. Then in 2003-2004, Maui Economic Development Board, MEDB, established a process to go out and interview in focus groups 1,700 residents in groups of 5 or 6 or 7. I suspect a number of you participated in those. They compiled all the input from the residents and put out a study which was given to the General Plan Advisory Committee to guide us, along with the people of Molokai and Lanai, since it's countywide. We worked with their two advisory bodies and came up with a countywide policy plan, which the council adopted. And then we got the Maui Island Plan, and that's what we've been wrestling with, and we concluded our work in February 2009. We sent off our version to the Planning Commission. Where are we? Go back to it. Yeah. And the Island Plan has, just I think, simplified, so sort of, what is the Island Plan got? It has 3 major components to it. The first, policies and actions. That's 9 chapters, and that's already been adopted. The council has reviewed that, adopted it, and they listened to the GPAC and the Planning Commission, but they also added their own verbiage. They weakened some things. They moved things around. They added some development projects to the thing, and they came up with their version of the plan, and that's what we have now as law. Then another component of the Maui Island Plan is the land use growth boundary maps. There are a series of those, urban, small town, and rural boundaries. The idea is that if you have development scattered all over the hillside, whatever, it's very expensive for the county to provide services, to provide water lines, police protection, fire protection, school bus routes, the schools themselves, all these things if the community is very much spread out. So that there's some idea that we should try to consolidate a bit and protect the open space on the one hand and make it much more efficient for the government to provide services which the residents wants. But there were three levels. The urban would be obviously the most intense. You'd probably expect bus service there. You'd expect sewer lines. You'd expect a dense street lighting, etc. Then you get small towns where the number of services are less, and finally you get to rural areas where residents in those areas should not necessarily expect those amenities that might be provided by the government. They may get some. They may get police protection if they have a problem, but they don't necessarily have sewer lines or bus services in all the rural areas. And then that was also adopted, and those maps are now available also on the county website, and I'll show you a couple of those for Haiku later. And then finally, we have the Maui Island Plan Implementation Program. That's what we're mainly talking about tonight. That's the one chapter that has not yet been adopted, which has how the county will implement the plan, where the money's going to come from, where it's going, what kind of projects, infrastructure should be built, etc. As I said, the GPAC finished in February 2009. The Planning Commission finished in October 2009, and the County Council has had this plan now since 2009, 4.5 years they've been sitting on it, and it still has not been adopted, even though the county law originally said they should complete it in 1 year. This is what should be in the implementation program: capital improvement, meaning the infrastructure projects, where the finances, where the money should be coming from, what types of taxes should be raised, or what kinds of federal money, state money, county money, property taxes, fees for service, etc. And finally, C, the schedule that would indicate the priorities for projects and who's accountable for them. That's all should be in the implementation program. This is Chapter 10 of the Maui Island Plan. Okay, now each community plan district, now let me stop for a second here. Let me, how do I kind of make this blank? What do I do? Anyways, let me just say, I'm going to go back one. Okay. What you'll see now are some recommendations. Lucien, myself, Mike Foley, former planning director, and a few other people took a look at what the County Council Planning Committee put together and said that they are making some, they've deleted too many things that are very important to the community. And so we're making 5 or 6 recommendations here that should be added back into the plan, into the implementation chapter. And it's that if you have the motivation to write a letter, to contact the council members, or you better come and testify next Wednesday, if you feel that these are things that you really care about, it might make a difference if the council hears from you on these matters. Here's the first one. We feel it should be needed restored into the implementation chapter. Each community plan district shall have its own permanent community district planning advisory committee. Hana already has such an advisory board, and Molokai and Lanai even have their own planning commissions. 5 Maui Island districts, where most of the development and decision-making is taking place, have no advisory capacity at all. West Maui, Central Maui, South Maui, Upcountry, and Paia Haiku. So what we're asking is that the following language be inserted into the plan. The council shall establish permanent community plan advisory committees, their rules, and responsibilities, and the mechanism to select members. Let me give some background. Right now, there'll be an advisory committee that will help put together your next plan. As I said, it may not take place until 2018-19, but it will take place in other districts on a different schedule. Once the plan is adopted, who's there to look after it, to make sure it's being implemented properly, the citizens don't have much say in it anymore, projects can be proposed, and it's very tough, unless you run down to the council every time, to testify on a project, to make any statement. So what we're saying is that there should be a mechanism that Haiku Paia District have a body, it could be 9 members, 11 members, 13, we're not defining how many people are on it, but that it should be established and its role and responsibilities. And so when a proposal comes forth from somebody to do something in the area, for example, a controversial issue here out in Haiku was the fire station many years ago. And it would have been nice to have had a committee representing this district and saying, A, do we need a fire station? Where should it be located? And whatever, and be able to then give advice to the county council or the planning commission or some other body in the county on an issue like that. It could be a developer who wants to come in and put some big shopping center, build a new Walmart in Haiku, and comes forth. This advisory committee says, yeah, we'd love to have Walmart. In fact, we want 2 of them. Or we don't want any. Whatever might be the desire, but at least it allows the community to get together. And right now you have a Haiku Association. There's also a new and trying to reform Paia Association, but the two don't necessarily meet together. This would be one that would cover your district and look at what are the best things for your district. So we're urging that that be put back into the plan. It was taken out by the planning director. The second item, relevance of old documents. Very often, the planning commission, other county commissions, and the county council will be asked to make decisions based on information contained in documents prepared many years earlier. For example, a traffic study completed 6 years earlier may no longer be valid because other developments have gone in, new roads that were supposed to have been built, weren't built, etc. So what we're asking is that, and here's the language we'd like to see, all studies and documents completed more than 5 years ago, 5 years prior to an application, shall be considered out of date, unless the decision-making body affirms by a positive vote that the document is still timely and relevant. Let me give an example of what that means. Let's say somebody does come in for a land use change, and they go to the State Land Use Commission and submit a traffic study, or an environmental impact statement, or a cultural resource archaeological site, or something, and they submit it and they get state land use approval to go from an agricultural area to an urban area. And then the developer decides to wait a while. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, long time, and then comes back to the county and says, we'd now like to get a community plan change and a zoning change for that parcel of land. At present, the county council sort of is in a pickle there because they've got a traffic study that was done 5, 7, 10, 12 years ago, earlier. So what we're saying is that if it's over 5 years old, it should be sort of considered automatically out of date. And if the body, the planning commission or the council feels that really nothing else has changed in that area, we'll accept the old one. That's fine, but at least they have to take a vote on it. It doesn't automatically become acceptable. And they can then say, no, it is out of date. We'd like you to redo your traffic study or your environmental impact statement. Or for example, take something that might happen in Kihei. Somebody would come in with a proposal and the drainage and everything else was fine. But in the interim, since their last environmental impact statement, there have been several big projects up the hill in Kihei that were built that will change the drainage situation down below. That means that the old study that was done earlier on that lower property may not be valid anymore. They may need better containment or some other method to handle drainage issues. So it's that kind of a concept that we think we should be working with the most recent data we can get. Yeah, the state is in the process of also looking at changing this requirement, but we'd like to see it done at the county. We can't rely on the state necessarily requiring it. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons the state wants to change this is because you're making decisions based on lies, basically. You know, someone said that 8 years ago this was true, and it may not be true now. And so there's a lot of lawsuits that come up, and people usually win the lawsuits because the information isn't there. So it's really to the public's interest to have these fresher documents, but the public doesn't know what's going on very often, and so this is our one chance to speak up and say, yeah, let's get something that's current, let's get something that actually talks about what the conditions are here.
Excuse me, listen, isn't this a good time? You said the state is lying. Isn't that the whole basis of the state? It's a lie. This country, the Hawaiian Kingdom got stolen by so-called the American dream.
Yeah, so lots of things in the state.
Just a wake-up call, no disrespect to everybody here, but I think most of you are Americans. A lot of us are not Americans anymore. There's a growing movement. If you look on the international level, it's growing leaps and bounds. I've been doing this for over 43 years. You should look on your computers. It's called the Hawaiian Kingdom blog. You'll get educated really quick. We have people going to the international courts of justice, common courts. They're going to Europe. So don't fool yourself. These your plans, your American dream, might change quicker than you think. So I respect everybody here. Please respect the Kanaka Maoli, the original people here. We see our land, and everywhere, everything American dream touches, it's getting polluted. You know, you see it on the world level. The American government is the biggest war-making industry on this planet. So
I think you have
wake up, wake up, wake up. Mahalo, wake up. Aloha.
Another item, there'll be 5 or 6 of these things we're recommending. The need for neutral environmental reviews. Proposals to change land uses are often accompanied by a required environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement prepared by a consultant who's been hired and paid for by the developer. Because the consultant may owe their allegiance to the developer and not to the general public for whom the environmental documents are being prepared, the general public is not best served by this present approach. So this language we'd like to see inserted. EA's environmental assessments and environmental impact statement documents shall be prepared by a consultant selected by and under the direction of the planning department, not by the developer. The consultant shall be paid by the developer making the proposal. So in other words, if A&B Corporation wants to go in and put a big development in a certain area, they would not be able to write their own environmental documents. Rather, the county would say, we'll pick a firm, they will do it, you pay for it, A&B, for the thing, but we want a neutral study who owes their allegiance that was critical of a project, or that pointed out blatant problems with the project that would say it shouldn't go forth, even though there were some serious issues. And that's because the person hired to do it was hired by the developer. So what we're saying is, let's try to take that connection away and try to get the general public to get better information that may be more neutral as to what's in the document.
Dick, can I just ask one question? How does this provide sufficient protection when you've got a planning department that's headed by essentially a developer?
Yep, and it's 100% true. We can't think of any better way at this point to take it away from the developer. I mean, it'd be nice to say there'd be somebody else from the outside, a judge could appoint it. It just isn't going to happen. Yeah, it's just.
That's a valid observation. California does not have the developer choose the person who does the environmental impact statement. They pay for the statement, but it is chosen by the planning officials of the particular town. And actually, our state law says that the state shall prepare and that the developer shall pay for it, but no one ever enforces the state law. So this would only be, you know.
Yeah, this is already done in California. Is the law that the planning department, not the developer, does it? Okay. This is one example of what could be dozens where the word may was substituted for shall. On page 10.4, we'd like to go back to the word shall. To ensure that no ambiguity exists regarding infrastructure funding responsibility, the county shall establish an infrastructure funding strategy to ensure that infrastructure improvements are implemented prior to or concurrent with development by the responsible party, depending on the nature of the infrastructure project. Let's stop right there. What that's basically saying is that when a developer comes in, they very often will go ahead and put their project, and then the highway doesn't get built in time, or the intersections, or the connecting roads, or the school system isn't ready to handle the increased impacts on the community. What we're saying is that the county should have a process by which those infrastructure needed by the project are done and not just made. Okay, the next one, the local line, is a more technical thing. There are two graphs, two tables that were in the GPAC recommendations, 9.1 and 9.2. We want those put back in again. Those deal with where the county will get the money to build and do the infrastructure that we all very much need. We all want, you know, a Paia bypass or a new park somewhere, a playground done. So the county should have a variety of funding sources to do those things, depending on the type of project it is, how many people benefit and impact. And it may turn out that the community of Haiku, for example, says, we want a swimming pool in our community. The county keeps delaying it, never does it. And maybe the community in Haiku says, we'd like to have a $5, $10, $20 assessment added to everybody's property taxes in the community so that we can build a swimming pool in our own community. And we'll give residents of our community who property owners or renters here in the community, we'll give them a card that will allow them to get in. I mean, that's just the type of thing. We want the county to have the flexibility to find ways to satisfy infrastructure needs other than only through the county budget process. And I think this is the last one. All future community plan and zoning entitlements shall have a fixed time limit to discourage land banking, provide for more stable employment opportunities, and to ensure smooth planning. The entitlement may be considered void unless an appeal for an extension of 2 years has been approved by the county council. And what we're saying here is that the county very often, the planning commission, gives a landowner a large area to be developed, and then the owner of that land does not go ahead and do it. And I'm going to give an example. Haligi Maili, up in up country, was given by the last community plan a entitlement to add on an area of 160 houses to Haligi Maili. The committee that recommended that, and I was on that, said that Haligi Maili right now is so small as a community, it cannot have any services at all. But wouldn't it be nice if that small community had its own primary school? Or perhaps it was a little bit larger, so like somebody could have a store in that community. A&B got the rights to put that housing in 20 years ago, and they never built the houses. And so the community got essentially cheated out of what they were asking for was some amenities to make that community a little bit more viable rather than just group houses in the middle of the cane fields. There are many, many other examples. Another big example, McKenna Resort. McKenna Resort got entitlements in 1974, all kinds of entitlements. All they built was a hotel and nothing else. But there was a need for housing and need for other types of things that could have been built in that community. And now that, as we all know, has gone through several ownership changes and whatever, and still nothing is being done to meet the original requirements that were approved for. Now, maybe some people will say, that's great, they built only a hotel, nothing else. But there are other projects which were very much needed. A&B got approvals for things, Maui Island Plan for things, for housing projects. They said, oh, we're going to build it next year. And the workers said, oh, we want that. And so the county said, okay, we'll get some jobs for our carpenters and plumbers and contractors. And then the owner of that land, Maui Island Plan, would say, we pull a hua out on the west side. They just never built it. And it keeps good development, once it would actually go through, from being developed, because the county says, well, we already titled so much areas, we're just not going to allow anybody else to come into that area. Let's see where we are. Okay. I just want to show you two maps that were in the Maui Island Plan. These have already been approved. One here is, as you can see here on the right, is between Paia Town and over on the left side there is the airport. And then, oh, okay. Okay, obviously Paia Town here, Lower Paia, Upper Paia Town, and that's the small town growth boundary that you see around it. There's a small area of the Sprecklesville, which is classified there as rural. Now, the next map will be one probably more interesting to you. This is these are the growth boundaries for Haiku, Pauela area. Maliko Gulch is up here at the top. Here's the area here where the stores are, and right now we're down here in this area here where the school is located around here, and the community center here. That's the areas that would be allowed to have growth taking place in that area. And here's a little bit of a close-up of that same thing, and it shows the areas here. You'll notice one area here over here. This is the old Maui High School site, which has a certain language in the plan that describes what can go into that. But if you're interested in a particular area, parcel, you can go to the Maui Island Plan site and see a little bit about your community and where things could change or might not change.
Well, while you have that map, why don't we just talk about it in a minute? While you have that map up, why don't we just talk about what it says?
Okay, we do one last thing and then you go on that one. This is the, again, this is the first slide I showed. Your opportunity, if you care about any of those issues, the old documents, the need for environmental impact statements that are up to date, all those kind of things, please give your testimony to the council. Lucian and I will be answering questions in a few minutes. Lucian, talk about it.
Yeah, just want to comment on the map. There is no urban growth boundary in Haiku. There's no red lines. It acknowledges that the small town area that already exists around the old canneries will be a small town, and that gives more flexibility in zoning in a small town. You can have parcels that are, used for industrial purposes. You can have parcels that are used for small businesses. You can have residences right by side. It's kind of like a traditional planning concept where you don't have everything completely separate. And all the blue areas are rural. Now, rural allows a half-acre minimum lot, although you can also have 1 acre or 5 acre rural lots. Most of the areas that you see that are rural were not rural before. They got changed during the community plan update. Even though most of the people from Haiku who came to testify said, leave them ag. They were permitted as ag subdivisions. Either the planning department was kind of lying to us, saying that they were ag subdivisions, or they are ag subdivisions, and but they're now rural, and supposedly they're not going to be able to build more density on the lots, but you never know. I mean, if you have one of those lots, you may want more density on your lot. But for the services here and for our little roads, probably it's better to leave things at ag scale where we are now. But the community, we had a survey recently at the Ho'olalea, and one of the things people weighed in on is having an ag park in the Haiku area. So all of this ag land, ag zoned land, we could have something like that. That's why when you look at a plan like this implementation plan, if there isn't enough flexibility in it to, for communities to be heard, like these local community planning groups, it's going to be hard to get those kinds of things accomplished, because we just have to have endless meetings and, knock on doors and so forth. It'd be far better to have an orderly process where the things the community wants just come before their local little planning group. People can come to a room like this after work, talk story about what they want, and then it goes as a unified recommendation to the council. It just would seem to be a better system now that Haiku is kind of a more grown-up community.
Let me ask you that one little thing. This is the Maui Island Plan. This is going to become the framework when you folks design your community plan for Haiku. You'll be going into an area, let's say like this one here, or this one here, these here. Within those areas, you'll be able to say, okay, in this area here, this this small town area, we want stores on this side of the street, and we want churches and service buildings on the other side, or whatever you decide you want. This will become the framework. But if you say we want to develop this area, which is outside of a growth boundary, then it will become much more difficult to get development. The one caveat on all that is agricultural land, which is land for the most part outside, can be subdivided into smaller parcels on what's called a sliding scale, but it can be divided. So you may see development taking place in other areas besides just within the growth boundaries here. Or if a person owns a piece of land already here, that doesn't stop them from building a house on their land and going ahead and developing it. But it will have a definite impact on subdivisions and larger developments.
Okay, we're getting into questions. You want to
Can I just ask a quick question? I live right up here, the second row of houses with the old pineapple field and training yard out back there.
Right above the school?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When was this calcified?
That actually, that had urban zoning at one time. It had single-family zoning, and they chose to make those things rural just because the level of services here, that they don't have sewage treatment plant or anything. And so if you say it's urban, it needs to have a sewer line. It needs to have stuff that we don't have here. So it's rural.
It's rural on this plan, but the zoning has not been changed yet. So if you're concerned, how come my urban zoning?
Well, because they just, they're planning on putting a farm fence up, just like they did on the other corner at the quadrant intersection up there. They're gonna put what they're saying is horses or cows, they mean A&B properties or whatnot. And just supposedly we had a covenant on there that there were no houses supposed to go back there, but the covenant is only a hold agreement?
Well, it should be legally enforceable, and you guys should get a little bit of legal advice, in our opinion, you know, because covenants can be enforceable, it depends how they're written. But this kind of goes back to the idea that the closer you can have decisions made to the community level, the more people can keep accountability. It's really hard when you meet once every 15 years and do a community plan, then who follows that? I mean, very few people, you know, policy wonks like Dick and I, but most people just go back to their houses. We have a terrific community plan in Haiku and Paia, and we have very good provisions in it, but most people are not aware that our goals for this community are really good ones that we would all support. And it's not necessarily what happens, but you have to go and hammer on it and say, hey, our goals were this and this is happening. It shouldn't happen this way. So if you were made a promise, you know, there should be a way for that promise to be honored, because these are promises too.
These are promises.
Yeah, these are promises
Not
as
just
well.
a guideline, it's more like you do.
Yeah, these maps are not just a guideline. It's supposed to be a real promise that this is, you know, this is where we're heading with this. Yeah.
And Mr. Mayor, were you saying that what ag is separate from here? So like across the street?
Areas outside the boundary lines here,
Yeah.
those ag areas are not within a growth boundary. People can still do certain things. It doesn't take their development rights away, but those rights are severely limited. For example, no lot less than 2 acres. You have a 100-acre lot, you can't just divide up into a bunch of 2-acre lots. There's what's called the sliding scales. You might have a couple of 2s, some 10s, and 15-acre lots in there. And there are other restrictions on there, what can be done. But development does not get frozen outside that boundary.
Thank you guys.
Okay, Lucienne's going to do her thing. And
No, I'm not going to do slides. I think we can move up and start answering the
okay, let me
questions.
just see what else. Okay, there are going to be 3 or 4 issues coming up as well. I just want to briefly do this. This is the area that A and B, let me go take a step back. The county now is in the process of trying to decide. Please. The county right now is in the process of having to move the service center where you get your driver's license to another facility. The owners there, I guess, are not renewing it, and they're looking at a couple of options. One of them, no, the one in where next to the movie theater in the old Maui, in the Maui Mall.
Okay.
They're going to have to move out of there. They're looking for another site. There are a couple of options that are out there. There may be a third one as well. And one of the possibilities would be that they would move it to an area behind Walmart in that big business park that's now been developed back there. And if that happens, that's A&B owns that land, and A&B would get some money from the county, $7 million or so, to allow the county to go ahead and put in that process. And in the process, part of the exchange, the county would get this parcel of land here, here's Paia Town here, between Paia Bay Beach here, and here's Baldwin Beach, get all of that land in between those 2 parks, 2 areas there, to become what would really be a North Shore Park area. And that would add 35 acres. Baldwin Beach Park, right now, is still owned, by the way, by A&B itself. A&B owns Baldwin Beach Park. But the county has a lease on it, and what I talked with Mike White about today is, why not try to get A&B also to donate at this time this beach park, because it's on conservation land, they can't develop it. Why don't they just hand it over to the county? And that would allow this whole area to become a North Shore Beach Park residents, up country, Bahia, Haiku, a major enhancement of the whole area. So that will be something coming up in probably in the next few weeks at the council. There's an opposition proposal, and that is to put the county service center in Maui Lani, Kealani area between Waikapu and Wailuku, and the county would get then some affordable housing land, some land for affordable housing. And obviously there's some people who are pushing for that project. The ideal thing would be that the county get both. The county get both parcels of land for future use, but at least try to get this area here as an addition to the community.
So those are both on the
Both
have side, it's A and B, they have both those parcels.
no, A&B does not own. The other parcel is Kealani, which is the big project.
Stanford
along
Car.
separate
Two
capital.
different owners are vying
Yeah.
to see where the county will move their facility, and they're each offering something to sweeten the deal.
Oh.
A and B is offering this parkland to sweeten the deal.
The reason they want that is because they know that the service center will draw lots of traffic into their shopping areas. Okay, this is another thing that's been sitting here for decades in people's minds is, why can't we get a bypass around Paia? I think most of you are pretty familiar with the wonderful traffic flow through Paia. And this is conceptual, it's not the root of it actually, but the idea would be to take a highway, Mauka, by the sugar mill maybe, the old sugar mill, and then over here, come over here, where exactly would enter the highway here, or where it would depart from the highway would be a matter of engineering and everything else. But the idea is to do this, and this keeps getting delayed in people's plans, including on this Maui Island Plan. They're putting it out at least 8-10 years out before they even begin really doing anything about it. You folks will be great-grandparents by then. And lastly, there's a proposal to take land over here, across the, here's where we are now, right here. Here's the school area here. To take lands over here, this large area here, and make it into a large agricultural subdivision. Mike Gagne can tell you a lot more about that, but I just want to point out where we're talking about is this large area over here. And I'm not sure if it really starts over here at Maliko Gulch and goes across, or it's just this area alone.
I can speak to that. It starts right at the point by Maliko Gulch. There's one private in-holding there that's about 5 acres just past the point.
Right.
And it is A&B partnering with a developer from out of state, and it's a consolidation and re-subdivision. So they don't have to go through the whole subdivision process. The subdivision process brings a lot of scrutiny to things, but a consolidation and re-subdivision, you just say, oh, I have a lot of little lots, and they all have separate tax map key numbers, so I'm going to combine them all, and then I'm going to re-subdivide them into different sizes that will be more saleable. And this was something that was passed during Linda Lingle's administration. The idea was it would help family farms, divide lots for their kids. Well, that's not exactly what happened. It's the favorite loophole of people who have large chunks of land to avoid much in the way of any kind of infrastructure dedication or public review, because it's an administrative process that's done in the subdivision office, and you kind of never hear about it.
Here's the school here. Obviously, here's the highway that runs through Haiku right here.
Yeah,
So
the
it's
people,
basically the highway and the ocean.
the people who are partnering with A&B to do this, they have honored the fact that the whole edge there, up between Maliko Gulch and K Bay, and the lighthouse, the whole edge is conservation in our community plan and open space. And so they have allocated 37 acres to be a walking trail and park, and it is open now, and you can walk there, and it is a very, nice place to walk. It does need some cleanup, but
Where do you access it from, that last gate?
there's a gate with a little sign on it. Not the last gate, it's the middle gate, and there's a little sign that says public access, and it's a short walk down to the shoreline. So that is something positive that could happen out of this, but the negative part of it is that my understanding is that Alex Bodie's wonderful farm that he has down on K Bay is going to be evicted, and he's being given some other parcel someplace in here, but I mean, that was a traditional, he really restored a traditional village down there, and it really had, I think, a cultural component that was important. So, Alex, is Alex here?
He's here.
Well, Alex can speak to it. I'm just giving secondhand information, but,
So
Lucian, we've heard some rumors that in that area, which is designated as 618 acres, there has been talk about using a large portion of that to put in a huge wind farm, which would provide power should the undersea cable be put in, and essentially Keahi would be providing electricity for Honolulu.
well, I will say that there was a request for proposals put out for large-scale wind projects. And one of the lands that was shown in that, and there were tons of places shown, was along in this area, somewhere, you know, around K Bay over to Jaws. I was told by folks who know more than I that the request for proposals was kind of like a red herring, you know. It was just to sort of see what would happen, but there was no intention to follow through on any of the projects. So I don't know how real a threat that is, but it could be a threat. I mean, really, the community association needs everybody's help to track things and bring them to the attention of the community. And they may be wonderful new proposed things, or they may be things that are not well thought out and not really ready for prime time. So, you know, that's our job, is to try to sort stuff out.
What we'll do is we'll, I think, have a discussion, and you can discuss the two really different topics. One is some of the haiku issues that we just talked about at the very end, and some ideas about the Maui Island Plan.
Yes.
We'll have a public hearing next week.
I'd like to start by thanking Tim for always having this great equipment. Thank you, Tim.
We had a question back here?
Yes, on your insert that you wanted on table, you wanted table dash 1 plus
9.1,
and 9.2 inserted, then on the same sentence, what is the table 10.1?
Oh, they changed chapter 9, and now it's now called chapter 10.
Oh,
They
okay.
just moved that implementation because they had a chapter 10 at the end. They essentially approved 1 through 8 and 10, and now since 10 became 9, and now 9 is going to become.
Is it
10.
confusing enough?
Yeah, so you want.
I want the old GPAC table numbers 9.1 and 9.2
All right.
Yeah.
put into this chapter.
Here we go, this is the chapter. Kathy in the back there.
I don't know if I'm the only person who's outraged, but a planning director comes in who's not even involved in the feedback and makes all these recommendations and changes the plan. And I know you mentioned 3 of them, but how many just, I think that this process could be actually illegal from a land use, from the council not looking at the other recommendations at the same time. But how many others, just not going into it, how many other changes did he pull out or change besides the 3 that you mentioned? Just approximately.
I'll take that first, and then Dick can jump in. The interesting thing is that this implementation chapter had an earlier version from an earlier planning director. And it wasn't exactly the same as the GPAC version, but it was a lot closer to it. And so you actually had a planning director kind of look at what the public had done, and that planning director was involved in the process, sat through many meetings and things. And they said, okay, we can live with this, but we can't live with that. And they produced a document that was reviewed by Corp Counsel that, should have been okay. And then you had the new planning director come in and just say, no, it's not okay, and there's substantial changes. If you look at the old planning director's version and the red lines, the thing is full of red lines. They just decided we'll just take out this whole section, and we don't need this, and we don't need that, or we're going to restate this. Now, some of the changes, they tightened up the concepts. They weren't bad. But some, it's like, wow, whole concepts got lost. And some of those concepts, we heard from people were important, like the idea of having these community advisory groups. It was probably the #1 thing we heard from people over and over again, like, I can't drive to the county at 9 in the morning and testify. So if something's important to me, can't they have a meeting in my community that I could say my piece, and I know a lot about this, but I can't go down and tell anybody about it.
Isn't that currently happening in HANA?
Yeah, it's happened for years in HANA.
HANA has had an advisory committee, and for example, one of the rules now requires vacation rentals to get approval process, go through an approval process, rather than operating illegally. And HANA Community Advisory Committee reviews it and gives its recommendation. And in most cases, they say, this is fine, but they may also add a caveat that there's no parking on the road, it should be on the property, or whatever it might be that they want to add to it, that goes then to the Planning Commission, which does give the final approval. So HANA has it. The irony, of course, is that HANA, Molokai, and Lanai have their own ability to make these recommendations, and that's when the least development is taking place, how anything changes. Whereas South Maui, West Maui, Central Maui, had huge changes taking place. Almost weekly, we see something in the paper, something proposed, and there's no ability for the general public at 9 o'clock in the morning to go out and testify.
Yeah. And you have to know the right morning too. And you have to hope they don't change it and you just, you know,
If you find out about it
change
at
your
all.
work schedule and you get down and, oh no, well, we have to put this off to another time.
An example is, that's been controversial, is the big park in the middle of Central Maui, sports park, that they wanted to put, they also put, and most residents didn't even know that it's being put in their area. I mean, they have ideas, they say, yeah, we want recreational facilities, but not a mega sports thing that's gonna be open at night with lights shining in our house, etc.
Bonnie, did you have a question?
Yeah, because I had a question about water meters. If they're proposing to do all this development, where is the water coming from? I mean, my understanding is, I remember reading about someone who waited 30 years to get a water meter. You know, are we complete with people waiting? I don't think so.
Yeah, no.
Well, one of the problems is that the water department, water meter list and this plan don't necessarily meld together the way they should. We argued for it, we want them to do. So there are people who have water meter applications that are outside the growth boundaries. And the application says, I want to put in a subdivision of 20 houses.
Right.
Well, the plan.
But it's an ag subdivision.
It could be an ag, and there are some real issues out there that have not yet been faced by the county, has to face them. The administration promised when they got elected 4 years ago that they would take care of the water meter issue in the first year or two. It's now the fourth year, and they still haven't. They're promising this year they're going to start issuing water meters, but only a few. How they handle it long term, because they have
Exactly.
1,800 applications in, representing 3,400 meters, potential meters,
Right now.
right now.
Right now, yeah.
My
And
friend's waiting, it's been
Yeah.
4 years.
Everybody else?
Could you address the impact fee issue as it relates to the 1,100 acres of potential development? And
The county has already got a few impact fee things. So in other words, somebody who wants to put a development is required to do have a park assessment to provide a certain park thing. They can buy their way out of it, but at least it's mentioned what they need to do. There's a school assessment that the state runs, so anybody puts a development in, they put in 100 houses, so much per unit has to be contributed to help build more schools. But the amount that the state requires for schools is so trivial, you don't even get a classroom out of it. I mean, it's just really, it's just the idea that they have it. The county went ahead and 4 years ago now, and authorized a multi-$100,000 set of studies to calculate what should the impact fees be for highways, for a police station, for fire station, for wastewater, for sewage, those kind of things. What impact will it have on existing residents when they put in all this new facility? They came up with some numbers, they did a really thorough analysis, and the planning department has the studies back now. They refuse to send them over to the council for approval. They just refuse. It sat on their desk now. In fact, the lady who was killed in that airplane crash on Lanai, Kathy Kern, was the one who headed that project up and did an excellent job and got it organized and worked on it for 3 or 4 years. They all bemoaned the fact that we lost this great planner, but all the work that she did, they're unwilling to move that impact fee study over. That would affect a project like this large project across the street here of a proposed development.
Yeah, even ag subdivisions would have to pay impact fees, where now, of course, they don't. They're kind of like skate-free. Dick and I both sat on an advisory committee with about 10, 15 other people for like 3 years on that, and you know, dutifully went to these meetings, dutifully read papers, dutifully gave impact. There's something not right about this system. I mean, why ask citizens? And there were a lot of high-powered people. There were people from, you know, with architectural degrees, former planning directors sat on this. They got good input, but there's something going on behind the scenes that just doesn't seem to be right here. I want to remind folks kind of what's missing in a nutshell. In essence, this is about sound planning. The idea that we need language that makes it clear that infrastructure needs to be in place first before development. We already have that in the South Maui Community Plan. I think the West Maui Community Plan does as well. But our general plan shouldn't have the same language. It kind of doesn't make sense. Instead, it has a watered-down version that says the county may decide to require infrastructure to be in place. It's like, come on, get real. And then, of course, the local, having a local voice. Each planning district really needs their own advisory group, even if these groups meet 4 times a year. That maybe they don't need to meet every month. Maybe we could just kind of store up things and make big decisions, because I think that there's a worry about how expensive it would be to assign staff and everything. But I hope any one of you who testifies would just say, I cannot drive to the county council. I want my voice to be heard. I want something in there to say there's going to be local planning group. The GPAC had it in their version. It was reviewed and it was okay. It's like, put it back in. And then the third thing is these reliable information, to have old environmental studies and old traffic studies and archaeological reviews that were done when archaeological knowledge was just so far different than it is now. None of this makes any sense for good planning. It's like you just gotta like pony up the money and do things right. And then of course the funding things that Dick talked about, whether it's the impact fee study, whether it's having language in there that acknowledges we're going to do creative things to find funding. That language was in there until the current director just redlined it all out. It was in up until November of last year. So what was wrong with having language in it saying that we're going to look that way? Because if we want a new reservoir for our country, if we want to have a special improvement district so that we could have sidewalks in Haiku where our kids go to school or whatever, if we don't want to wait around for the county forever and ever to put something in the budget, the law allows communities to do short-term civic improvement districts. You can say for 3 years, we'll each have $10 more a year on our taxes, and we use that money to build our fire station, and we'll use that money to build our agricultural park. But we should just have that option in our major planning document. That option should be there. So those are just a few of the things on kind of the human level, not the language level, but like, why it would make sense.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
So you are 2 of the 25. Do you have any idea how your other 23 colleagues feel about this? Are they in agreement with what you're saying? Do you talk with them about?
No, good question. The committee was made up of 25, represent geographically a broad spectrum of areas. Also, in terms of their orientation, we had vice presidents from AV, from Maui Island Plan on there. We had the head of the Contractors Association, the former head of the Chamber of Commerce. So there are a number of people who would be considered, in the development community. On the other side, we had people like Luciana and myself, who've been longtime advocates from a slower growth, environmental perspective, looking at things of that sort. And we had, out of the 25, the result of our work of the 2 years, we voted very often. The votes came down 13, 12, 14, 11. We were divided. Sometimes it went one way, sometimes occasionally people switched from one side to the other for a variety of reasons.
And sometimes almost everybody
we came up with a plan that was put forth, and it's that plan that we're trying to defend, the one that the GPAC together as a body was recommending. And it was taken out, a lot of those provisions were taken out by the planning director. And the council planning committee also went along with the director at this point.
We do have to be clear, though, this gets a little technical. The GPAC, unlike the council, couldn't just give itself endless time to complete their task. And so we gave ourselves a 6-week extension, but that didn't give us time to take a final vote on this chapter. We had an independent committee that reviewed it. Both Dick and I sat on it, and 3 or 4 other people, including like an engineer, people that know about like public works sort of stuff.
Infrastructure.
Jeannie Scope from Maui Economic Development Board sat on that committee. We came up with what we thought was good workable language, sent it forward, but the way that the system worked, you couldn't just vote on it once the committee made its recommendation. You needed a whole other extra meeting. We just didn't have that extra meeting. And so the whole GPAC actually never voted on this language. But the planning director at the time, because he respected the process, because he had sat through and seen how much the public came out and how much GPAC tried to represent the public's interest, he incorporated many of the suggestions in just a good faith effort. So
The previous plan.
yeah, the previous planning director. So his draft really kind of moved all that forward, even though our little GPAC committee didn't take its final vote on it. Yeah.
How long has this new bad planning director been with?
You know, he's a very nice person, and, you know, we shouldn't, like, castigate him. He is doing his job as he seems fit, but it just, it is frustrating if you have given 3 years as a volunteer, and you try to do a good job, and you try to listen to people, and then someone comes in who didn't go through any of that, and they just get out their red pen. He's been in since Alan Arakawa was elected mayor. He was appointed by Mayor Arakawa.
3.5 years. So he's had extensive planning experience over the years. He was a planner in the department back in the 90s. Richard?
I just wanted to add to a comment that Lucienne made about the GPAC process and how the public's concerns and voices were ignored. These members of the GPAC committee spent thousands, I'm sure, of hours working and attending public hearings and listening to the community members voice their concerns about all of the elements that went into the GPAC. And they made their recommendations. The very first meeting after GPAC turned over their work product to the planning department and the planning committee met, they decided they would have their meetings in public so people could see what was going on. And the first meeting was here at Haiku, and they all gathered here and they talked about different provisions of GPAC. And one of the provisions that a lot of us testified...
You mean different provisions of the Maui Island Plan?
Of the Maui Island Plan. Yeah. And one of the provisions that a lot of us talked about was the importance of taking into consideration the impact of any development decisions on the Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian practice of that culture. Because we are all guests here, and that culture should be respected. The first meeting that the planning committee had here, one of the first issues that came up is one of the members said, well, you know, there's this thing in here about considering Hawaiian culture in any of our decisions. I think that could just add another level of bureaucracy, and nobody likes bureaucracy, so I move that we strike this provision. And it was that simple, and they were ready to go to a vote. And fortunately, one voice, Jeff Hunt, stood up and castigated them and said, wait a minute, none of you people were at these hearings. You didn't see these elderly people standing there with tears in their eyes, begging GPAC to consider this provision and to put it in their recommendations. And it's not right for you to sit here, look at a line on a piece of paper, and just strike it without having any of that experience of how the community came to this point. And so they withdrew that motion at that time. I don't know what ultimately happened to it. But that's how easily the voice of the community can simply be ignored.
Yeah, it's a great point. Jeff Hunt was the former planning director.
Jen?
I want to just piggyback on that because that's why we're in this room tonight. We sent out flyers and emails that said, unless your voice is heard, this is not going to go well. That's what we're saying. And I'm not going to mince words on that. So you have one opportunity to testify, and that's on the 14th. You can email the county council. I hope have that information in your handouts. You can visit our website again to look at updated information, or the Hula Community Association's website as well. I will be sending out an email on this topic with specific details for those of you who signed in on our email list. So if you didn't have the opportunity, please do so. We need to make sure that our democracy is a democracy. And the only way that that happens is if we show up and use our voices. And, you know, I'm not here to tell you, none of us are here to tell you what to say, but I am here to tell you to say something and say it loud. Because that's what we have to do if we want to keep the democracy. And if we want to have a Maui that you know, we like. Right, Lucia?
What we'll do is those 5 or 6 recommendations. I said these are ones we want to change. I'll have that on an email sheet with the email addresses for the county council members on there, and you have that already. And that you can send out to folks. Did you take emails tonight?
I did.
Good.
One-stop shopping. How many people here think that they would be able to either send in testimony or come in person to testify? Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We won't be alone.
What do you want us to say?
Well,
See me after the meeting.
yeah. Just speak for simple things, you know, say there are things that need to be back in this plan, that, you know, you need some stronger language so that there is infrastructure comes at the same time as development. I mean, everybody can agree on that. It's common sense. And that you can't use old planning documents to plan recent things. They have to be, you know, updated. And we need a local advisory group in Haiku and other communities.
Yeah, good.
You don't mention that some communities have advisory groups and some don't. Do you know which ones have?
Yeah, the three areas where there's, Hana has one, Molokai has its own planning commission, Lanai has its own planning commission. Hana is the only community on this island that has an official advisory body to the county council and to the planning commission. The reason why those three have it, obviously, is because they were remote. People in those areas, it would be very difficult for them to come down and testify in person. That was the rationale originally used to set those three up, which is excellent. It should be maintained. But at the same time, there are other people who are also remote in the sense that they work all day long and can't get to a planning commission meeting or a county council meeting. And so that's why we're saying that even those communities that may theoretically not be remote from the county building, for residents, it's a remote situation, it's a difficult situation.
Haiku must be remote because my wife couldn't make it.
I talked to him today, he said he has, I mean, I can't say, I'm not defending my, council members have dozen invitations almost every night.
Yeah.
They have to pick which one to go to. I'm not saying that he made the right choice or the wrong choice, but he made a choice, as did all the other council members who were out there.
Is he keeping quiet on how he feels about these?
Well, I think he will be responsive if he sees that a wide variety of people have concerns. I think he'll take them into consideration. You know, he's a guy.
And if you see any of the council members walking around Costco or Long's or wherever you're shopping, don't hesitate to walk up to him and say, you know, I'm hoping you put some real teeth into the Maui Island Plan and add some of these provisions in there. Because I think that it's important. They really listen. They so often say in council meetings. I've been talking to people. They've stopped me in the aisle at Safeway or wherever, and so they do listen.
Call them, they call you back.
Yeah.
Call them, they send their reps to see you.
Nikki?
Yep.
Also.
Yeah, just for one question and then the first point of information based on what you had just said. There are people in this room that live in Puelo, and Puelo is actually represented in the county council by Bob Carroll. And Puelo, and Lucian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it goes up to Kailua.
Yeah.
So the Paia Haiku Community Plan includes Puelo. So anytime people mention that, oh, Mike White doesn't come to a meeting, anything that happens here should have both Bob Carroll and Mike White. Now, there are people that feel differently about having Puelo being part of HANA or being part of Haiku Paia residential district for council. That's a whole other story. The question I have for Dick, you mentioned something and I feel bad somehow that I'm forgetting so much stuff. You've mentioned about the community plans are supposed to be done every 10 years. I think I recall that it was actually laws and ordinance, it was a requirement. And so the county, our county council, which has the authority to manage thing and set fines and all that, is actually out of compliance, is breaking the law. And it's just another point of information. I don't think that anybody's ever challenged the county, has sued the county, because this process, like the community plan that Dick mentioned, that's 15 years ago for Haiku Paia, and people can see who live here the changes, and that's gone across the county. So just another point of information.
One of the problems is individuals would find it very expensive to challenge the county. You want to go to court and say, county, you have to do something. You talk about tens of thousands of dollars just to do that.
Well, the reality is that when we win or lose, it's still our money.
Yes.
So that's the other one too.
Right, you're fighting your own money.
Right,
Yeah.
you're paying your own money to sue yourself.
Yeah.
So that's also, so I'm not advising anybody
Yeah.
to do that. I just, again, just a point of information, because you know, it's just something to be aware of. Those community plans, it was a great idea every 10 years. There was actually a talk at one time about having neighborhood boards like they do in over on Oahu, And there was actually a meeting, I think it was 10 or 12 or 15
Yes.
years ago, that I was out. There's a real movement that a neighborhood board, which is a bit similar to this community
Advisory group.
advisory group.
Yeah.
The other thing that just occurred to me, as I get off, is the bypass, the Italian bypass you mentioned. I've gone to about a half a dozen meetings. There's a part of the state, so there's something going on there. It's only recently that I saw that all disappeared. Again, there are maps, there's consultants, there's groups, they break out, what's it called, where different groups break out and talking, so there's different paths. I mean, there's all this work that's been done, and then all of a sudden to hear that it just disappeared. So somebody somewhere in the State Department of Transportation, because that's a state bypass, and so there's a lot of discussion about that. So this whole, it's not just that, there's actually people have met and set up a whole, there's books on maps and all this about that. And it's only recently that I heard, they said, oh, we'll have another meeting, and that was maybe a year and a half ago.
Well, Nikki's right on the bypass. It is now in the implementation plan as getting planning funding in 2022. That's planning funding for acquiring the route. Well, it's like, I think that's going to be one of the topics that the HCA works with the Haiku Community Association on, because we do have to push on the state, but the county has a role to play in that too, because it's a land use decision as well as a county, as well as a state road decision. And oddly enough, there's just been a very interesting case before the courts about who owns certain public roads. This happened to be the old Haleakala Trail. This could have a lot of implications because there is actually already a route that was a public route called Sunnyside Road, but the state and the county don't claim it as public land. And yet if they did, they'd have something to trade for free, so they could get a free route and it would save a lot of money. But of course you have to ruffle a few apple carts in order to advocate for that really being a public road. But the proof is out there, just like the Haleakala Trail. There's plenty of maps that show it as a government road and so forth and so on. So that's just another sidebar. One thing that did disappear from the implementation plan is any reference to having long-term transportation corridors. This was something that was really kind of talked about a lot at GPAC. Because a lot of folks said, if this is supposed to be the 30-year plan, this is supposed to be the big vision, why aren't we talking about setting aside just some corridors? They may end up being bus routes, but if we have the corridors now, as developments go in, we can say, Mr. Developer, you got to leave, this 40-foot or 50-foot wide space because we may need it for a transit corridor someday. You can use it for drainage, you can use it for open space, whatever.
Or bicycles.
Leave it, or a bike path, yeah. And there's no downside to it. It's good planning, but it has completely disappeared from the implementation plan. We had a map, we had a subcommittee that worked on this.
We have the Maui News even extolling, this is the most important part of the whole plan.
Yeah, so it's, I'm looking at the map right now that we helped create. It's really kind of one of those things where the community should have some accountability during this process. So I think just a bunch of people going down there and writing and so forth is going to maybe wake the council up a little bit that not everybody's asleep at the wheel, and people are going to ask for some accountability.
The time is advertised until 8 o'clock. Lucy and I will be here 24 hours, but feel free to leave if you have to.
Speaking of corridors, the visual corridor, is there anything in this Maui plan regarding the visual corridor? I mean, I'm so curious. I would love to hear what this man has to say about this development going on over here. Maybe this is not the right venue, but there has been some development above Moliko Gosha that's just so unappealing.
It is, yeah.
And I'm just wondering about our visual corridors as far as how that goes from the high side.
Viewplanes. There is a whole section on scenic resources that talks a lot about those things. There's different policies. If you want to meet after the meeting, I could just email you that section. It's maybe 3 pages long, 4 pages long, but it has some fairly good policies. The county did commission a viewplane study. Hana Highway here is categorized as top A viewplanes for views of the ocean, views of the mountain.
Does that mean like maintain topic?
Well, and that and $1 will buy you, you know, a candy bar. You know, it's like unless people go in and slug it out, when these developments come, all these good intentions are forgotten. But it's better to have them in the plan, because then you can wait and say, but your policy says you should do this.
You have to look at the language. That's where the words like may, shall, discourage, encourage, prohibit, require, those words become very critical as to what those 3 pages may say. And I don't remember offhand exactly what the words are. But that, where it says something is required or prohibited, that's law. That the plan and the enabling legislation for the Maui Island Plan and all of the community plans states very much there are guidelines and there are laws. And where something is a law, it's a law. And so it's passed by the council, it's part of the county code.
So if somebody takes advantage of the view plane or disrupts it or something, who's, like, can the little citizen go in there and say, excuse me?
Well, it's at 2 levels. One is when a project is being proposed, then it goes through a review process to get yes, no. And at that point, if something is prohibited or required, you have the law on your side. The second thing is, let's assume nothing was mentioned early on in the process and this project got approved, and then they go ahead and put up a bunch of walls that, prevent you from seeing the ocean again. You can then perhaps go to the ordinance and say, hey, they weren't allowed to do that. They went ahead and did things that our laws said were not required. So it's really at probably 2 different stages at least.
Yeah, in fact, Daniel Grantham here and Greg Blue, both board members of Haiku Community Association, went to bat for some of the scenic views along in here, and they were told by our council person, oh gee, I don't know if we can do anything, but they went down and they dug deeper and they found that actually there were applicable laws and things in our community plan, and they actually did get a little bit of action by doing that. So a citizen can do something, and that's why it's like these plans are written in kind of, basic language, and so you can, like it says, loss or degradation of scenic resources are part of the island's shared quality of life, and they affect everybody. And so, there are policies here that should be affected. A greater level of protection for scenic resources is the goal in this plan. Doesn't sound bad, does it?
And that's where you begin using phrases that you might not normally use. We want to protect our tourist industry. They come here for the views. You start destroying the views, you kill the island's economy. So it's not something you may say, I generally don't want to see lots of hotels going up everywhere, but you turn that around and say, it can be then become a tool for you to say, I want to protect the scenic qualities, the open space, et cetera, of the island. That's a question of your tactics and who you work with, and then going out and getting other people, getting an editorial in the Maui News, saying, hey, they're destroying the whole Hana Road, or they're just whatever it might be. Sir?
Well, I want to thank you, Dick, for coming down, and Lucianne, and Kula. Your plan is a solid plan, and I want to thank you for sticking out, because we've been fighting this battle for a long, long time. And I think it's good with our community associations coming together. We need more numbers. We need to stay on the fight. And I commend you for sticking it out, because that's the thing, is the county's kind of a trick bag. They tell you something, but then again, look, what's the position of the mayor? Because Will Spencer's a good guy, but somebody's pulling the strings, folks, and have been for a long time now. So. No one knows who the Wizard of Oz really is, but it's the people with the money that's controlling the council. The council really has no power. I can tell you how I've just dealt with it for 8 months now, trying to get some comprehension on simple stuff that they couldn't even make a decision on. So, I think we need to keep pushing. I think everybody needs to bring more people in there. What's the position of Mike White, Alan Arakawa, and the rest of the council?
So he voted for the version that is coming up. He voted in the planning committee for the version that's coming up on the 14th next week. That doesn't mean he'll not change his position on certain phrases, certain paragraphs, certain sections of this implementation chapter. It's up to us to convince him that, hey, that, you know, that was a nice first effort, but what we really need is to get some of the citizen input into it.
Right. Well, like the last time I saw you, we were at the Kula, we were talking about the Greenway Plan. We've been talking about the Greenway Plan for 20 years.
Right.
I saw Mike Foley at the Community Association. I said, what about the Greenway Plan? Everybody got together. It's too bad that Chris Hart died because he was really leading. It looked like we were going somewhere. And then I asked Mike Foley, I said, what about the Greenway? And he said, green waste? Greenway. At least, you know, Mike White was saying, look at it as a linear park. A lot of people are frightened about it. When Brian Miskay had it, he was pushing it. Then when Mike Foley got it, he let it go. And I said, Mike, why was it let go? And he said, well, certain people didn't like that. Who were that? Oh, Holly Eckler Ranch. Well, so what? And Holly Eckler Ranch thinks that they're going to take their property and the trail up there is going to be, you know, people liable. That trail has been used for a long, long time, in ancient times. And now, here a property owner says, wait a minute, you can't use this anymore. That's not right. And it's not right what they're doing because they're stepping on us as a community and everybody should be mad as hell because to spend that amount of time that y'all have spent and then to have the county go back on that. I got one more little project.
Make it short because I think we
I
really do have to wrap it up.
I just want to let you know the update on Giggle Hill because back in 1911, when they closed, when they put a fence around it, and we said, Mike, I went to Alan and we all testified, how can they do this? This is supposed to be a part of the equestrian plan. Well, everybody thought the Giggle Hill was protected. We got it, I was on the committee for the Marines, they turned over, but nobody saw the map. Everybody thought that the whole hill was part of the park. Come to find out it wasn't. We thought, well, U-Star is going to develop the pineapple fields, but nobody knew that they were going to close off the park where we had planned the equestrian and greenway system to come out of there. So I wrote, you know, I went to them, and here's what they said. I know you've been in touch with various people and heard a planning issue. You see a possible move forward on the Greenway Master Plan. We are waiting to hear back for the response. We are talked about on the phone and other options, concurrent options moving forward with the acquisition of Giggle Hill. Attached to the remaining budget hearing that is being held by the mayor. One option is logging the mayor put in these budgets via open space fund. Councilmember White is open pursuing this idea, but also recognizes there will be an administration that will have to do the heavy lifting regarding negotiation, especially since the land is technically not on the market. Hopefully we'll be in touch. So no, I asked him to respond to the update, and this was in 2011. So this is what I got today. Just a quick update on Giggle Hill. Unfortunately, there hasn't been much progress. In the budget, we did make put aside a placeholder account, whatever that means, for $100,000 open space, natural resources, cultural resources, and scenic view preservation fund for the expansion of 4th Marine Park. It will be carried over to fiscal year 2015. Our suggestion would be to start a petition or write a letter campaign to mayor and see what would have to be and want to negotiate any land transaction. The land acquisition for the area, as you know, Council White is very supportive of the area being preserved, but the council cannot negotiate on the behalf of the county. We will only appropriate and approve any type of funding in land purchase. So nobody's really doing anything. We don't know what the land.
Let me ask you, I mean, as important as it is, it's not the subject for tonight. That's something that you and the association could perhaps take up and do it. I know a number of people have to go and.
Well, I'm wondering if it's in part of that development.
The implementation plan has a lump sum for parks, and it says in the central Maui area, does not break out North Shore at all, which kind of surprising because, you know, we have our own community plan. But it has upcountry, it has West Maui, it has South Maui, and it has Central Maui. It's just a lump sum, and you have no idea what's going to really be in it. All those kinds of details actually were in the earlier version of the plan, and they've just all been removed because the county doesn't want to feel obligated. So, I mean, I guess you could see it both ways, but it also is frustrating for citizens because you don't really know what's planned.
You know, the plan has large amounts of money for parks, unspecified.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for coming out, for spending so many hours here. We can go on, and I'm sure if you want, I'll stick around for a while, Lucian probably will too, if you want to have some individual discussions on things. But I want to thank the association for inviting us. I would hope that you'll be able to go to the council, either personally or through correspondence, and let's try to get the best plan we can. And Jen, thank you very much for having us here.
Thank you all.
Bravo!